Hi there, it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. I'm here to talk to you today a little tiny bit about sensory defensiveness. You probably know this as people who don't like certain textures, kids who won't eat certain foods, a child who is constantly adjusting the seam in her sock. That would be me. People who do avoidant behaviors about touching sticky things or getting muddy or even getting wet. Sometimes kids won't even eat any food that's not sort of already chewed. Easy to digest foods like chicken nuggets and applesauce and things like that are fine, but anything that needs to be crunched is unacceptable. There are tons of different kinds of sensory defensiveness. I've talked a lot about sensory craving behaviors, sensory seeking behaviors on this channel, and I'll put some links to those videos down below. In this video, I want to talk to you about what to do when your child shows signs of sensory defensiveness. There is only one strategy in this area, and that is something that we call exposure therapy. Basically, it is a progressive, step-by-step exposure to the very thing that the child doesn't like. And obviously, if there are tons of things in the child's environment that he really hates, we have to start with just one. This is a very slow process, so don't expect that next week your child will be eating normally and playing in the mud like all of the other little boys. This is a slow process, and I'm sorry to have to be the one to tell you that, but it is slow typically. I also want to say that if your child is not eating a balanced diet, you need to get the help of a feeding therapist. Some feeding therapists are occupational therapists, and some feeding therapists are speech-language pathologists. I don't know which you're going to find in your area, but please seek them out. Children, especially children with autism, but children who have very particular likes and dislikes when it comes to food, who have narrowed down their food choices extremely, do not typically get the vitamins and nutrients that they need. And we want them to have a wide variety of nutrients to draw upon to be able to develop, to be able to build the brain chemistry that we want them to have, to be able to function better. You'd be surprised at how much it can help a child make progress in learning new skills, communicating better, regulating behavior, not getting as anxious. All of these things can be drastically improved with a better diet. Check out some of my videos on the topic of diet and developmental delay, and please talk to someone if your child has difficulty in these areas. The sooner you get it dealt with, the less rigid your child will be around food. And what we want is non-rigidity around food. We want to be flexible. We want to be able to eat this. We want to be able to eat that. We want children to have a wide range of nutrients to draw from. We're going to start out this progressive exposure therapy by finding the very mildest exposure to the offensive thing that your child can tolerate. And then we're going to slowly turn up the level of offensiveness. The longer the defensiveness has been going on, if your child is 10, it's going to be more difficult to work through this process than if your child is 2. This is why we talk about early intervention for so many of these things. The earlier we start, the easier it will be. I'm not saying if your child is 15, don't bother. I'm just saying it might take a little longer because those ruts are deeper and it takes a little more effort to get out of them. If you have a teenager who will only eat super mushy foods and white foods, maybe you make applesauce. And first, you make it really liquidy, really mushy without too many chunks. And for a couple of weeks, that's what you do. And assuming your child eats it and likes it, then maybe after a couple of weeks, you don't make it quite as smooth. You leave in a few more chunks. And at first, your child will probably protest a little bit or say, it's weird, it's kind of funky. And you just say, it's applesauce. I made applesauce before, I made applesauce now. Just keep eating. Hopefully your child will just keep eating. If your child refuses to eat it, then we take a step back. We make it slightly more smooth again, or we teach the child how to mash up the little pieces. There are lots of different ways we can progress between there, but we're moving forward each step, slightly chunkier. And then the next week, maybe you leave the skins on when you make the applesauce so that it's a little bit more chunky and not as smooth. We continue this process until the child is pretty much able to eat the whole apple. Obviously, there are a lot of stages in between super smooth applesauce and the apple itself. For example, baked apples, apple pie. There are all sorts of different things we can do in between. We just need to be a little bit creative. But you can see we constantly want to be pushing the child, but not so much that it causes him to lose control or that it pushes him over the edge so he won't eat it at all. We don't want that. We have to keep moving forward, but just a teeny bit at a time, so it's not that noticeable. Maybe it's still slightly unpleasant, but he's willing to eat it. After one food is shifted to be slightly less mushy, then we try other foods. Maybe we go from a bread to a pancake, to a wet cracker, to a graham cracker, to a saltine cracker, and then to like a Fritos. And Fritos are super crunchy, and we started out with super soft. You can see how we can make progress. Psychologically, that's always a good thing to see progress. But at the same time, the child is moving slow enough that he's not shutting down altogether. We need to find that balance. And it is a play. We have to adjust all the time. Let's talk about textures on the skin. If your child is only able to wear very soft textures, start out by helping her maybe pick a shirt that's super cool with glitter and pink and princesses, but it's slightly less soft than her very, very favorite shirt. And just require her to wear it for a few minutes. We can either change the item itself, like the applesauce, or we can change the duration we expect the child to participate. If your child resists participating in mud activities, for example, at first you're just going to want to get her hands dirty and then wipe it right off. And then you'll get her hands dirty and say, oh, I lost my towel, oh. And then when you get your towel, it's been maybe a minute. And then we talk about how, sometimes it's kind of nice to have mud on my hands. Maybe I can clap them together and it makes a funny noise. Maybe I can smear it in the grass and that feels kind of cool. And eventually the child is able to play in the mud with the other kids because we worked on duration. Same deal with clothes. At first with maybe uncomfortable socks or shoes that have ties on them rather than just flip-flops. Maybe we say 5 minutes, we have to leave our shoes on for 5 minutes, and during that 5 minutes, it's helpful to have some sort of a distraction. Maybe you don't allow screen time, which is a great idea, by the way. Check out my video on screen time and why it's a bad idea for early childhood. Maybe during the time where you're working on these offensive things, maybe you read a book, maybe you have a special toy you play with during that time, but during that time your child is exposed to this offensive sensation. We don't want that to last so long that the child loses his cool, totally freaks out, and loses self-control. We also want it to be pushing the envelope a little bit. We want to play the edge here with our child. While you're doing the actual exposure, don't keep drawing attention to it. If your child says, you can say, oh yeah, it's okay. Shoes are on, but just for a couple minutes. Isn't it cool that we're making cookies together? Isn't it nice that we're playing gears? I love the marble run. Whatever you're doing, keep talking that up and kind of playing down whatever sensory experience is not that pleasant. After the time is up, when you're doing the exposure, talk about how great the child did and how it wasn't really that bad and you're so proud of her. This is the process of exposure therapy. And if you want to know, it also works with adults. If you have a particular thing that you can't stand, the only way to get over it is by exposing yourself. I don't like wearing socks. I never have. The seams always drive me crazy. I have quite a few little sensory quirks. And the only way to get over it is by wearing socks. And there are some days where I'm overwhelmed. And on those days, a lot of times I don't wear socks. And I have to have that flexibility with myself to say, you know, on those really hard days, it's fine that I don't wear socks. That's fine. You're gonna have to be like that with your kid too. You're gonna have to say there are some days where everything is crazy, possibly at the full moon. All of our kids have more needs right around the full moon. If it's a full moon, don't work on this. If there's another time in your child's day or week that is especially difficult, that is not the time to be exposing him to additional offensive stimuli. Try to make it fun. Try to make it as easy as possible for your child. This is a long process, but it is super, super beneficial because your child will have fewer quirks afterwards, and because your child will be more functional, will fit in society better, and will probably have better nutrition, better play skills, and better social skills because you chose to work on this. Have fun exposing your child to offensive stimuli, and I'll see you in my next video. Have a great day. Bye.